Should mention that our trumpet player this morning, our conch shell trumpet player, is from West Virginia. My wife, Lynn Dalzell. I think some of you have met Lynn. Where do we go from here? Yeah, where do we go from here? These last couple of weeks, well, a lot has happened. Now, we recognize that hurricane season comes to an end this month. At least we hope that it comes to an end. Yeah? All right, there's still a storm out there somewhere. But we hope that dissipates. November 30th, that's when everything is supposed to come to an end for hurricane season, and we're supposed to progress to the holiday season in December. We've been hit by or at least, well, sort of hit by 3 hurricanes this year, and this is the way we live now, and we're concerned about that. Where do we go from here? Election Day, November 5th, Tuesday. There were a few surprises, right? Okay, all right. I was surprised. I think that as much as anything, what happened on Election Day, and of course many things happened, but it's symptomatic of a cultural change. A lot of things are happening in this country right now, and we're not just talking about politics or economics. We're talking about something that goes very deep. And we have very good reason to be concerned about some of these cultural changes as we look ahead to next year. Inauguration Day, January 20th. What's going to happen between now and January 20th? And then what happens after Inauguration Day? Where do we go from here? That's really the theme for today's presentation, my sermon. And I'm going to suggest that one of the best things that we can do right now, starting this month, is to focus on holiday celebrations. Because there's going to be a very significant series of holiday celebrations, starting with Thanksgiving and going into January, at least as far as Inauguration Day. Which by coincidence, and I think many of you know this, if not, you'll soon get the good news, it's also January 20th, the day when Martin Luther King's birthday is celebrated. So think about that. What's going to happen on January 20th? It's a holiday of very great significance, and arguably it may be a great turning point in the story of this country. And I hope that all of you in your different ways find ways to be involved with the events on January 20th. And you don't have to go very far to be involved, because right here in Tampa, we'll talk about ways in which we can connect. First of all, though, I want to talk about Thanksgiving Day, November 24th. That's the day when many families come together for the great family meal of the year. And we all sit around what we hope is the welcome table, and we try to come to terms with people, relatives, friends, neighbors, co-workers, maybe we haven't seen for a while. And when I was a kid, I was always advised by my mother, don't talk about politics and religion. Actually, I was told, don't talk about politics, religion, and money. These are all very sensitive topics. Maybe they're sensitive topics at your family gatherings. But inevitably, family conversations sort of come around to these topics. And frequently, somebody will turn to you. Maybe it's happened. Maybe it'll happen in the future again. They're going to ask, well, you're a Unitarian Universalist. What do you believe? What do you think's going on in this country right now? What is it that you anticipate? And when that moment comes, and may come very soon, what do you say? While trying to keep the peace. Okay. You might just say, well, pass the turkey. Hope nobody's offended by that. past the cranberry sauce. But I think it is a moment of truth, Thanksgiving Day, family meals. And when you have to think about and then explain who you are, what you represent, say a little bit about your vision. Many ways to respond. One of the best responses that I've come across over the years, Bill Sinkford. Some of you remember Bill Sinkford. He was, okay, all right, he was president of our National Association for a number of years. He's now the senior minister in Portland, Oregon. And on one occasion, actually several occasions, Bill Sinkford, when asked to explain Unitarian Universalist, summarized it in 6 words. I think it's 6, actually. He said, one God, nobody gets left behind. How's that? Okay, one God, nobody gets left behind. Now, I pause for a moment to say how you interpret God. Well, we leave that entirely up to you. There are many churches that affirm a belief in God, and they're going to tell you exactly what it is you're supposed to believe or how to interpret God. But among the Unitarian Universalists, it's an individual choice. And some of you may say God is the power of love, reconciliation, the power of peace. Many of you might say God is the power of nature. Of course, nowadays some would say the goddess, not God. It seems much too masculine. The goddess. Maybe God goes beyond gender. Maybe God is transgender. That's it. Okay, think about that. Okay. You can interpret God as you like. And if you want to reject the concept altogether, and many of us do, atheists, agnostics, skeptics, you're entitled. But Bill Sinkford says, one God, and nobody gets left behind. And that comes straight out of our Universalist teachings, where we believe that love extends to everybody, and that ultimately we will, one way or another, find that we're all members of the same community, interdependent. And we don't want anybody to be left behind. Bill says that his religion, his understanding of religion, is a religion of thankfulness and of reverence. Galen Gingrich, some of you may know Galen. Galen's the senior minister at the All Souls Church in New York City. Galen says, my religion centers on gratitude. Everything else may be important. But when I center on gratitude, I realize I'm dependent on others, and I'm grateful for that. And I realize that others are dependent on me. And it is in the acts of giving and receiving that I find gratitude. And this, says Galen Gingrich, is a personal understanding of religion. And it seems very appropriate for Thanksgiving Day and other days, but especially Thanksgiving Day, which is the first holiday that I want to talk about. Because I suggest that we need to reconsider Thanksgiving Day. We can reinvent it, if you want to use that term. We need to take a second look at what it is that we're about to celebrate this month. Now, Unitarian Universalists have very mixed feelings about Thanksgiving Day, because I think for many of us it's too closely associated with imperialism, missionary activities, settler colonialism, and not just in Massachusetts, but Florida and other places. And in many places, Thanksgiving Day has become closely associated with Christian nationalism. You know, the idea that Christianity becomes triumphant on days like Thanksgiving Day. Supposedly, white people come to the Americas And then they had this big, and of course it is a Christian celebration. And they sort of invite the natives to come and observe and maybe have a piece of turkey. But that's about it. For many people, it really is the coming of what we now call Christian nationalism to the Americas. And as Unitarian Universalists, we're not really comfortable with this. We're not comfortable with the commercialism that surrounds today's Thanksgiving Day. Because, of course, for many people, this is the day of holiday parades, which then leads into the commercial season associated with Black Friday and Cyber Monday and all this other commercial stuff. So we have a great many reasons to be uneasy about Thanksgiving Day. And yet, in the midst of this, we have opportunities for which we can be grateful to go back to the basics, to talk about how and why these days of Thanksgiving started and what they really, really represent. And of course, we know that Thanksgiving Day, harvest festivals didn't start with the Pilgrims or the Spaniards or the French or some other group of imperialists. We know that harvest festivals started thousands of years ago in the Americas with native peoples. It wasn't necessary for people to come across from Europe to teach the gospel of thankfulness. It was already present in native cultures. And many of these celebrations continue to this day among Seminole peoples and others. So we recognize that this first Thanksgiving Day was celebrated thousands of years ago. And in some ways we need to go back and reclaim it as best we can. We need to be grateful. We need to pause to be in right relationships with others. And as we try to reinvent Thanksgiving Day, we can put all of that Massachusetts stuff, all of that historical stuff aside as best we can, if we can, in order to move ahead towards a genuinely multicultural appreciation of the gifts that we've received. We can invite native people, other people, everybody, including the skeptics, into a celebration of Thanksgiving Day. It needs to be a multi-faith event. I have my own story about Thanksgiving Day in the Unitarian Universalists, which I share on occasions like this. I was sort of involved marginally, very marginally, with the Unitarian Universalists for many years, at least 20 years, before I actually got involved and joined a congregation. And typically I would go to a service, Sunday service like this one, and I would sit in the back or maybe up in the balcony, and I would sort of watch very carefully what was going on here. All right. And if the preacher stumbled or whatever, then I sort of wondered maybe that had significance. Who knows, you know. And the hymns, you know, I wouldn't sing a hymn until I'd read all the words and made sure that I agreed with every one of the song words. Okay. So, you know, very skeptical. And then on one Thanksgiving Day, actually it was a little bit earlier, but we were celebrating a Thanksgiving meal at the UU Church in Sharon, Massachusetts. Something happened that changed my spiritual and religious life. I went to the meal, sat down, ate the meal. It was pretty good. I've had better, I've had worse. I got up to leave, and something remarkable happened. Somebody came out of the kitchen and said, "Could you help us clean up this mess?" Want me to do something? I was actually being asked to go, and can you imagine this? I was actually being asked to go into the kitchen and help clean pots and pans left over from the dinner. And I said yes. Somebody had actually asked me to do something in the life of the congregation, to give something back, not just to eat a meal and then run away, but to actually participate in the life of the community and to be useful. And after that, well, one thing followed another, and eventually I joined the congregation, and then nowadays, like 40 years later, I'm in Tampa speaking to you. So that's how I got to be a Unitarian Universalist. And it has a lot to do with Thanksgiving Day, sharing bread with each other, and then remembering to clean the pots and pans afterwards. Let me talk about some other holidays that we need to take another look at. December, of course, is the great month of light and enlightenment. Lots of holiday candles, lots of holiday cheer and holiday warmth, and there's a whole series of holidays, and new ones seem to be invented every year because somebody thinks they've got something new that they want to bring onto the stage. The first day that I think we need to recognize more often, December 10th. Human Rights Day. You don't have to belong to any particular religion or faith tradition or cultural tradition or nationality, race, whatever. Human Rights Day, the day when the members of the United Nations came to agreement on what it was that they wanted for all of humanity. Certain basic agreements that communists and socialists and capitalists and Hindus and atheists, Buddhists, Christians, Jews, that everybody could agree to one common document, one statement called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was approved on December 10th, 1948. Now, I have a gift for this congregation. I have brought a summary of that document. It's actually down just below me, and I'm going to give you this summary. And you can post it wherever you like. You can put it in the kitchen or wherever. But it's just acknowledgement of how important Human Rights Day is, and especially in the 21st century, and especially in this hour. Something that we need to celebrate. Las Posadas. Well, how many of you are familiar with that tradition? That happened. Okay. Las Posadas. It is actually a celebration, a lot of pageantry that's identified with Mexico and some of the other Latin American countries. And there are different ways of celebrating it. But typically what happens is 9 days before Christmas, little groups of people will go from door to door in the village or in the city. They'll knock on the door, and there'll be children at the head of the procession dressed as Mary and Joseph, and they'll ask for admission, and they'll sing a song, and they'll be turned away. They go to a series of houses, and eventually they'll find a place where they're welcomed. And I actually have a Las Posadas song, at least I hope I have it, and I'm not going to sing it to you because I don't sing in Spanish very well. But this is what happens. See if you can relate to this. Child comes to the door, knocks on the door. He said, "My name is Joseph." Of course, he's singing this. "I'm a carpenter. In the name of heaven, I beg you for lodging, for my wife, who is Mary, can no longer walk." And the householder, the head of the house, responds, "Go away. This is not an inn, and you may be a bandit." So Joseph and Mary go to the next house, and Joseph sings, "Have mercy on us. Don't be inhumane. We ask for shelter." And the second household leader says, "Go away. We don't want to be annoyed. If you don't leave, we will beat you with our fists." And they go to a third house and beg for sanctuary. And the head of the house says, "I'm old. I'm trying to get to sleep. Go away. Don't make so much noise in the streets." And this continues as the procession, the religious procession, goes through a series of houses until finally they find a place that says, "Welcome." This is a place of sanctuary. Come into our house. The pageantry group goes into the house and there's a fiesta celebration with a piñata and all songs and all kinds of things happen. And this happens for 9 nights. The last of the nights is Christmas Eve, when everybody finds sanctuary. And it's frequently at the village church, but it may be a community center or somewhere else. And everybody is brought in, including the householders who have refused sanctuary to others. They're invited to the party. Everybody comes to the welcome table. So think about Las Posadas. I've seen it enacted in some UU churches, and you probably see it in some of the communities in Tampa. Think about what it represents, people in search of sanctuary. At the head of the procession, Joseph the carpenter and his wife, looking for a safe place to spend the night. Now, something that Unitarian Universalists are working on right now is a call for a discussion about housing and sanctuary. And some of the congregations in the Tampa area have endorsed this call for a discussion. We want everybody to have a safe place in which to live. Okay? So we're especially concerned about homeless people. We're concerned about, people who might be trying to buy their first home, maybe a young family. We might be talking about older people looking for long-term care. We might be talking about immigrants, migrant farm workers. We want everybody to have adequate shelter. Sanctuary. A lot of people are going to be looking for sanctuary now. Many of them already are. Maybe tonight you may meet some of them. Maybe trans people looking for a safe home. Child runaways. People who've been abused at home. You'll meet other people too. We'd like to have a national Unitarian discussion about this, Unitarian Universalist discussion. We're asking congregations to be involved, to focus on what's happening, not in some remote place 3,000 miles away, but to really think about what's happening here and now. How can we be builders? How can we be visionaries? How can we provide sanctuary? So I hope that this congregation joins the discussion, and as we look around, maybe we can be helpful. Another holiday I want to mention that relates to this, the winter solstice. Now, the solstice this year comes at, I believe, 4 o'clock in the morning of December 21st. You can look that up if you like. We call that the longest night of the year. And at that time, even Florida can get very cold. And in places like Saint Petersburg and down in Key West and Tallahassee, other towns, this happens throughout the country, people will gather for the longest night of the year. And we read the list of everybody in the county who was identified as homeless who died during the preceding 12 months. So for Pinellas County, it would have been 114 people died in 23, and we read every name, and we ring a bell for every one of them. And for Pinellas County, the event takes place at the UU Church at Mirror Lake, and you're certainly invited to that gathering, but there are similar gatherings that happen here in Tampa, and maybe the congregation's already involved, but it may be something that's worthy of your attention. We remember everybody who died who was identified as homeless in the county during the preceding 12 months. Something to keep in mind as you think about the winter solstice. New Year's Day, January 1st, one of my favorite holidays because it really doesn't commemorate much of anything. It's not an event in ancient history. It's not a nationalistic event, New Year's Day. It's not identified with any particular religion, but just a nice time for people to get together and just to relax a bit. I'm a great believer in New Year's Day without the alcohol. And then finally, the holiday that's on the horizon, a day with double significance, January 20th. I've already mentioned January 20th. There's going to be Inauguration Day in Washington, D.C., and then throughout the country, Martin Luther King's birthday celebrated. Saint Petersburg every year, which is where I live, we have thousands of people involved. Several UU congregations participate in the parade. There are similar events here in Tampa and other communities. January 20th. It's going to be a day when some people want to tear things down in this country, cause chaos, mix everything up, keep people divided, confused. There'll be a lot of that on January 20th. And then in places like, well, perhaps this congregation, there'll be people who have a vision of something healthy and good. Reconciliation is possible, working for the good of the whole community, bringing people together. It's a day for visionaries and builders. A day to try to get things right in this country as best we can. I hope that Unitarian Universalists can join in this celebration of Martin Luther King's birthday. There are several kinds of people who you encounter at the family table each year, Thanksgiving Day and other occasions. Optimists say, don't worry, everything will be fine. Yeah, you don't have to do anything. Pessimists, everything's awful, we can't do anything. But then there's the others, the builders, the visionaries. Try to move forward in the new year. Try to get things right. It's still possible. And for all of this, we can be grateful. Blessed be.